Grace went to bed, so she's not going to be with us. The son of the Prime Minister. I roamed about the villages in a bullock cart. As I was the son of a Dewan, people fed me on the way with jowar roti and curds and gave me 8 anna pieces. The White City. There is a glory about the place. A seaman sailing across the Arabian Sea toward the coast of India would see a flash of white in the sky long before he could make out the small city, and he would know he was coming to Port-on-Bar on the Kathiawar Peninsula. As he came closer, he would see the white sails rising, and beyond the plains lay the purple mountains. The city walls were 20 feet thick, designed to keep out the Arab freebooters of an earlier age. Walls and roofs were built of a wonderfully rich cream-colored limestone from the neighboring quarries, and the stone was soft and easily worked, though hardened in time to texture and beauty of marble. The sea swept around the city on 3 sides and sometimes completely surrounded it, so it became necessary to build a white bridge to the plains. They called it the White City. Here, on October 2nd, 1869, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born, the third son of Karamchand Gandhi, the Dewan or Prime Minister of the small princely state of Porbandar. According to the Hindu calendar, he was born on the 12th day of the dark half of the moon, Bhadrava. It was not an especially auspicious day, and he could expect to suffer great tribulations. The birth took place in a massively built house, 3 stories high, which had belonged to the Gandhi family for 5 generations. The house, though much altered, survives. Though it looks more like a small fortress than an ordinary dwelling house, the interior, with its honeycomb of small dark rooms, is disappointing. There are rooms which are scarcely larger than cupboards, oppressively hot in summer, and so dark that no sunlight ever penetrates them. Only the top story, built of wood, was light and airy, open to the winds, and from these rooms one could look out on the white roofs of the city and the fishing boats bobbing in the harbor. Next door was a temple dedicated to the god Krishna. Not far away was the palace of the ruling prince, called the Rana, carved out of the same marble-white stone. Karamchand Gandhi was a small, stocky, broad-shouldered, immensely dignified man with a quiet manner and a gift for diplomacy. He could be abrupt with his children, who always treated him with the deference due not only to a father but to the virtual ruler of the principality. He had married 4 times. His first 2 wives died, each leaving him a daughter, and then the 3rd wife was suffering from an incurable disease he received when the 3rd wife was... When the 3rd wife was suffering from an incurable disease, he received her permission to take a 4th wife. He was then about 40, and Putli Bai was about 13. She was a small, quiet woman, remembered for her enchanting smile and rather prominent teeth. She belonged to the little-known Pranami sect, which combined elements of Mohammedanism and Hinduism, and was more concerned to establish an intimate relationship with God than to worship images or follow complex rituals. There was a Pranami temple in Port-on-Bar, remarkable for its simplicity and the absence of images. Instead, there are copies of the Quran and the Puranas, with the priests going from one sacred book in one religion to the other, as though it scarcely mattered that books were read so long as God was worshipped. The Pranami faith deeply influenced the young Gandhi. It taught charity, chastity, peaceful association between the followers of all religions, and a temperate life lived modestly. The use of drugs, tobacco, meat, and wine was strictly prohibited. Consciously or unconsciously, Gandhi grew up with the beliefs of that strange sect born in the early days of the 18th century. Putli Bai rarely attended the Pranami temple, for the temple dedicated to Krishna stood next door. She was a deeply religious woman, given to austerities and fasting, and according to her son, she was never known to recite any other mantra than the words, "Krishna the Lord is my only refuge." She was the first to rise in the morning, the last to go to sleep. From time to time, dressed in a plain sari, she would accompany her husband to receptions given in the palace of the Rana, and it was said that her advice on political matters was eagerly sought. She lived deeply and intensely in her faith, and her third son inherited his profoundly religious nature from her. Gandhi once described his family as a notorious band of robbers. There is some truth in the statement. As far back as one can trace, there are courtiers always occupying high positions from the princely courts of Kathiawar. About the year 1670, Lal Gandhi, from the town of Kutiana, became the assistant to the Dewan of Porbandar. Thereafter, for generation after generation, there were Gandhis in high administrative positions in the state, deriving their wealth and influence from their privileged position. Although they received no titles, they were aristocrats who handed down their powers to their sons. For 3 generations, they were merely assistants to the Dewan. Then Gandhi's grandfather, Uttam Chand, became the Dewan, a post which was inherited by his son Karam Chand. Speaking of his privileged ancestors, Gandhi wrote, "Judged by common standards, it would seem that they have acted with a fair measure of justice. That is, they treated people to a smaller measure of oppression. Oppressors they were, for they were in league with princes whose chief occupation was to extract as much wealth as possible from their subjects. To be the Dewan in a princely court was not always a safe occupation. During the reign of the Queen Regent Rani Rupali, who came to the throne on the death of her husband in 1831, Uttam Chand Gandhi very nearly lost his life. The state treasurer, an honest man, had refused to satisfy the Rani's vast appetite for money, and the ladies-in-waiting had therefore concocted a story about the treasurer's contempt for the Rani. She ordered the treasurer to present himself at her court to answer the allegations, and no one doubted that he would be immediately executed. He ran to Uttam Chand Gandhi's house for protection. The Dewan was absent, but his wife left him in the house. When the Dewan learned what had happened, he went to the Rani and promised to produce the treasurer if he was granted a fair trial. The Rani answered that she could do as she pleased, and threatened Uttam Chand with punishment unless he produced the treasurer at once. Uttam Chand thereupon returned to his house, smuggled the treasurer outside the city, and waited for the wrath of the Rani to fall upon him. It was astonishing, a heroic decision, but he was made in a heroic mold. He was a heavy, rather ponderous man, with a bulging forehead, deep-set eyes, and extraordinarily long arms. He told his whole family that they were in danger of being massacred by the Rani, and they quietly went about fortifying his fortress-like house. He had a small bodyguard led by a Muslim named Ghulam Muhammad Makrani, and these soldiers were placed in strategic positions. Soon the Rani sent her troops against the house. They were thrown back. Cannon were brought up, and the Rani gave orders that they should blast their way into the house. The cannonballs, however, merely bounced off the stone walls. In the nick of time, the British agent in Rajkot, who was responsible for peace and order in the Kathiawar Peninsula, heard about the affair and issued a peremptory command forbidding the Rani to lay siege to the Dewan's house. In the fighting, Ghulam Muhammad Makrani was killed, and the small army of the Rani succeeded in breaching the walls in 2 places. With his wife and his 5 children, Uttam Chand Gandhi fled to the city of Junagadh and took service under the local prince, known as the Nawab of Junagadh. The story was told that when Uttam Chand Gandhi came into the presence of the Nawab, he saluted him with his left hand. "Why do you salute me in this way?" the Nawab asked. "Because my right hand is still pledged to Porbandar," Uttam Chand answered. This incident occurred around 1840. It was a time when feudal gestures still possessed meaning, and a peculiarly feudal violence was practiced by the princes. In 1869, when Uttam Chand was dead and his son Karam Chand was the Dewan of Porbandar, an extraordinary event took place in Porbandar. The ruling prince was Rani Vikmatji, notable for his violent temper and his miserliness toward his dependents, who almost starved. He was a strange mixture of virtues and vices, like many princes of his time. He was chaste, kindly, cruel, intelligent, stubborn, and so independent that he dared to quarrel with the all-powerful British agent. At one time, civil war raged in the principality, for the warrior caste was determined to get rid of him, but he was popular with his subjects and won the war. The event which made the year memorable in the annals of the court concerned the heir to the throne, Prince Madhavseen, who had been slowly drinking himself to death with the help of his boon companion called Lakshman. When the prince was found dead, the Rana flew into a violent rage, ordered Lakshman to appear before him, and sentenced him to having his nose and ears cut off. This was done, and the unhappy man thereupon threw himself from the palace terrace into the garden below and quickly died of his injuries. The Rana turned to the comforts of religion and abandoned the principality to his Dewan. Karam Chand therefore ruled the principality in his name, protesting bitterly the intolerable habits of the princes, and as soon as possible left Porbandar and took service under the Prince of Rajkot, known as Thakur Saheb. Although Karam Chand Gandhi was the Dewan of a princely state, it must not be supposed that he lived in a great state. When he was at Porbandar, he would be found day after day sitting in the courtyard of the Krishna temple next to his home, conducting the affairs of the principality while peeling the vegetables for his wife's kitchen. In his view, the peeling of vegetables was just as important as his affairs of state. He would sit in judgment, adjudicate legal questions, fix the boundaries of property, settle family quarrels, and all the time he would be filling baskets with vegetables. In later years, when the Dewan's son became the master of a large monastic community, he would always insist that everyone from the highest to the lowest should spend part of the day preparing food in the kitchen, and sometimes when he was seen peeling vegetables, it was thought to be an affection of simplicity. In fact, Gandhi was merely following the habits of his father, whom he revered and whose example he half-consciously imitated. In him, the authoritarian father and the saintly mother were always present. Although there was much feudal violence, life in the small city moved at a calm, leisurely pace, unchanging over the centuries. The rumors of the outside world rarely reached the narrow alleyways between the white houses, and the visits of British political officers were rare. For some time the British had maintained a political advisor at Rajkot, 100 miles away in the interior, but he usually contented himself with supervising the affairs of Porbandar from a distance. Porbandar was too hot, too unimportant to be worth a visit. Gandhi grew up in a city which had never felt the full weight of British power. For centuries the people of Kathiawar had been ruled by Muslim princes and their Hindu advisors. Hindus and Mohammedans lived side by side, tolerant of each other's foibles, speaking a language, Gujarati, which was a strange mingling of Arabic, Persian, and Hindi words. Since Mahmud of Ghazni conquered Kathiawar in the 11th century, there had been no great upheavals, and though there were occasional battles between the princely states, a man could expect to live long enough to see his great-grandsons, and never fear they would be cut down in wars. The Fertile Peninsula was untouched by the great wars and cultural movements continually sweeping across India. Almost Kathiawar had been forgotten by history. In this enviable land, all religions flourished. Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Zoroastrians, Sufi mystics, and 20 other cults existed side by side, and in Porbandar, a seaport trading with Arabia, Africa, and the East Indies, there were about 100 temples to serve the inhabitants and foreign sailors. Eclecticism had become a way of life, and men worshipped as they pleased without any interference from others. The Gandhi family was devoted to the god Krishna, the enchanting blue-faced god who is counted among the 12 incarnations of the great Vishnu, one of the 3 supreme gods of the Hindu pantheon. In the 11th and 12th centuries, the worship of Vishnu had received a strong impetus from the poetic works of Ramanuja and Jayadeva, encouraging an exquisite gentleness and affection for all living things. Tenderness and humility were the watchwords. The Vaishnava, or follower of Vishnu, was characterized by his ecstatic joy in the presence of God, whose name he continually repeated, and whose cult objects were a small, round black stone and the sacred tulasi plant, an herb which he grew in his windowsill. In the 15th century, Narasimha Mehta, a Kathiawar poet born in Junagadh, had sung the glories of Vishnu and the Vaishnavas in a song which Gandhi heard in his childhood and repeated throughout his life. He is the true Vaishnava, who knows and feeds another's woes as his own. Ever ready to serve, he never boasts. He bows to everyone and despises no one, keeping his thought, word, and deed pure. Blessed is the mother of such a one. He looks upon all with an equal eye. He has rid himself of lust, and reveres every woman as his mother. His tongue would fail him, if he attempted to utter an untruth. He covets not another's wealth. The bonds of earthly attachment hold him not. His mind is deeply rooted in renunciation. Every moment he is intent on reciting the name of God. All the holy places are ever present in his body. He has conquered greed, hypocrisy, passion, and anger. A sight of such a Vaishnava, says Narasimha, saves a family through 21 generations. In this faith, the Vaishnavas lived and had their being. For them, life was a festival, and they were quietly content. The white city on the seacoast looked like paradise, and was inhabited by people who believed that God walked by their sides.